It's right there. All right. Good evening. Welcome. So last week, do
I really miss the days of having a lapel mic.
you want my lapel mic?
No.
I can give it to you.
I miss the days of both of us having them.
Yep.
Those were good days.
TJ, I'm looking at you, buddy. All right.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So give us kind of a recap of where we've been.
We have been at the beginning.
The
The
beginning.
preface. The preface.
And what is the main idea that we get from the preface?
To trust the story.
Trust the story is where we start out. We God's call from the creation story on forward through Genesis 11 is to trust the story.
Right.
He's looking for us, and his call to us is to trust the story, because his story is not like all the others.
That's right.
And we really see that in the story of Noah and the flood, don't we? Because every people group, every ancient people group has a flood story, just like Noah.
That's correct. But in our ancient flood story, God knew when to say enough destruction.
God chose when to stop.
Right.
God did it on purpose. And so it's very different. He's right there. So it's a very different situation we find ourselves in. And then last week we dealt with a question that Bill and I were talking about earlier today. We just overlook it in a lot of ways. What was the main idea of what we were talking about last week?
Are you talking about the genealogy?
Yeah, in that genealogy, what was the question that we were trying to answer?
Why God chose Abram.
Why Abram?
Yeah.
And it's easy for us to just skip on by that. Well, that's who God chose. Because even in the New Testament, the book of Hebrews, Abram is talked about as the father of faith. And we're like, well, he was just faithful. Well, okay.
Yeah, but why?
Why? Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. Of all the people in all creation, why Abram? Why Abram?
Because a lot of people were faithful.
That's right. There are a lot of good people in this world.
Right. But what was the difference? What made him stand out?
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't watched last week's video, you should.
Yes.
It is really...
It's pretty important to the leading up to this, like what we're going to say.
Everything else is so important. And here's what we want you to understand. Our goal in this is not to answer all the questions for you. We are not in the business of, hey, this is what it says, you better figure it out why you believe it. Because if all you get is a bunch of information and you go, okay, I accept that information, it is just information. It's just something that you know. It is not something that you believe. And so our challenge is to continue to say, well, this is an accepted truth and a historical view and a historical interpretation of this. And and it is a discussion and a discovery. Our mission is to lead you back to the Bible and you to read it and understand it differently. And understand it in a way that impacts you so that you understand and you retrieve the information on your own so that you believe it. Because that's God's mission. That's God's hope. Yeah, and so we can lead others. We can definitely lead others to a better understanding. And the thing is, we try to just give people information and be like, well, you figure it out. But the Easterner, right, says this is the information for you to chase down, to lead you back. That's why the midrash stuff that we talk about is so important. It doesn't contradict the text. It tells you something that's in the text that it's like, well, is that what it says? And it's taking you back to the text to figure it out, right? And so Then what? After the lineage of Abram that we found, I just realized I erased this thing and left this little spot right down here.
Oh.
And it's not getting any better. That's probably why it's still there.
Probably.
So, Chelsea, since I don't ever ask you to read, do you want to read today? Since your Bible's down there.
Since my Bible is down there. Sure. Jonas, can you bring my Bible to me, please? Jonas
so today
is coming. Oh, he's coming.
Today we are going to be in Genesis chapter 12 through 14. We're going to be really ambitious today. The 8th week of our study, we're going to try to get through 3 chapters. We're really going to need to pick up the pace here. So come on, Jay. We need the Bible.
You're dropping stuff out of it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. All right.
Oh, boy.
So,
you better not have me reading lineages again.
no, we're not even going to read all of it, but we're going to read this beginning portion. And
where are we? Chapter what?
12.
Okay.
Verse 1.
Oh, I thought we had already done that.
No, haven't done it. We talked about it a little bit in our discussion time.
Yeah, okay, that's
last week, but we're going to deal with it in major position here. So let's talk really quickly about the timeline. How old was we're gonna deal with here in just a second how old Abram is when he leaves Haran. And I believe the answer is 75. Yes, he was 75 years old. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. So if we do the math here, in verse 26 of Genesis 11, it says, after Terah had lived 70 years, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran.
So were they triplets?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay. Anyway.
I mean, that would make more sense than everything else that we had discussed.
When Abram leaves, Terah's 145 years old.
And he lived to 205.
205.
Okay.
So now, let's kick off Genesis chapter 12, starting in verse 1, and I'll stop you here in just a little bit.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Genesis 12, verse 1. Now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Then Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. Isn't that what he says?
Yeah, Canaan.
To Canaan. Yeah. Canaan. So they came to the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree Shechem. Of Moreh.
Yep.
And the Canaanites were then in the land. I have a hard time sometimes because my Bible has random words italicized.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean emphasis.
Right.
Like what I'm used to doing. Okay, I need you to go on. Get down. Yeah,
so let's, found it a long time ago. So let's pause real quick and let's talk about where we have found ourselves. Why is this such a big deal?
Yeah, so that's where he would ask, what are the problems here? Because, and I know what the problem is only because I listened to the podcast, but.
So what
is the biggest thing that sticks out about the fact that Abram has been told to do this.
Like in a Western society. Go ahead, ask a question.
If until this point in time that this is even being written,
Uh-huh.
so everything prior, which we are talking about now, Jewish laws or Jewish customs did not exist.
That's right.
Why is it important to try to address it or try to diagnose it from a Jewish point of view?
Well, it's important, not necessarily, it's important for us to diagnose the information as it would apply to the Jewish people. This is a Jewish book written to Jewish people.
It's about people that the Jews do not exist yet, so that's why.
Yes.
What I'm getting to is what seems most out of picture, and I know from former discussions where we were going was this is not the Jewish way. The Jewish ways didn't exist.
Correct.
At this point.
So he's talking about asking like the Jewish, this is coming from.
He is in the process with Abram developing that.
Right. And this is why it is. This is why it's so important. So first of all, it's so important for us to understand as believers why God chose Abram, why he chose Abram, and then we also need to see why what God is asking and how God is leading is so abnormal culturally, not just in what would be a Jewish sense, but in a cultural sense, cultural norm of the time. Okay? Because in the ancient world, and the Jewish custom was really not different from the rest of the customs in the area. It's very similar in this regard. A father's house was everything. It's called a Beidov. So it literally means house of my father. The word Beidov. They would have a Beidov. And your existence as a son, especially the firstborn, especially the Behor, he is the carrying on of the lineage of the father, of Terah. Okay? And because Terah is still alive, especially while he is still alive, in the Jewish tradition, this person has a mission, a calling, a purpose, a trade. What we would say in our culture, we would say that person has a profession or has, like, they do a certain thing. In the Jewish custom, they would call that a calling. So Terah has a calling, and all of these young men who are his, Haran, Nahor, and Abram, their job is to learn from Terah what he does and expand the reach and capability of the calling of Terah. So that's where this comes in. Inside of Dad's house, what is promised? What is significant about Dad's house, about Terah's house for Avram?
Sorry, everything that goes with it.
What all goes with it?
Everything.
Protection.
Yeah.
Yeah, money.
Livestock.
Food. Possessions.
That's what I was saying, everything.
What else? What else of significance would be associated with Dad's house?
The family.
family, prominence, something else. I'm chasing after something specific. Each family, each house, especially in the ancient culture of what we're talking about, this is why this is significant, of why we're looking at it from a Jewish perspective. Because we see certain things a certain way. And we don't understand what's going on here. Nope, I'm not talking about lineage.
I was going to ask the name. I
Nope,
don't know.
not the name. Until he dies, Abram's going to be recognized as Abram, son of Terah.
Right.
That's how he's going to be recognized. That is who he is.
Mm-hmm.
So, for God to call him to leave Dad's house, he's leaving all this behind. But there's something else here that would be a tradition and a custom for every home. And we see this in the book of 1 Samuel, when the Ark of the Covenant is stolen from Israel by the Philistines, and they put it in a place, and all these other things are destroyed and knocked down, and they get upset, and so they take it somewhere else.
God's. That's right.
God's.
That's right.
They have their customs and they have their gods, and they would have them.
Because you inherit all.
You inherit all of it.
Right.
You carry on all of it. So when God is calling Abram to leave Terah's house, to leave Dad's house, he's saying, leave all this behind. He's saying, leave all this behind. All of it. This is why it's so significant.
Right.
Right. 60 years. So that's what this is why this is such a big deal. And I agree with you. When we read this from a Western thought process, and we just read through it, and we end chapter 11 with Terah dies, right? End of chapter 11, Terah dies at 205 years old. That's why I said what I said at the beginning. And then we pick up.
And we're like, oh, Abram leaves. Okay.
God introduced us to Abram in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. Well, obviously Terah is dead and Abram gets called away, but that is not what happens. Terah is still alive.
Right.
We look at it as in our custom of like, if you're 25 years old and you're still living in your grandma's basement or your mom's basement or your dad's basement,
get a job.
Go get a job and get your own place and start your life already. But that is not the custom of this world, of the ancient world.
It was to continue to grow what your father already had.
Yes, because your strength was in numbers.
You know, I've been studying this in anthropology. I love that part of anthropology because we've talked about, I'm studying right now, the patrilineal lines and the matrilineal lines.
Yeah.
And about how they're the different customs of different people groups. And another thing that they talked about was as far as the way their marriages were concerned, how they wanted things to be an endogamous, I think is how you say it, where they chose the marriage.
Correct.
So because if there were certain people that if you married, you would lose part of your land.
Correct.
And they wanted to continue to grow it, to strengthen their own name as opposed to divide it.
And as well, like the bigger your family, the more protection there is.
Right.
Especially the more young men that you have in your family.
Right.
That's why big families, in the ancient world, having big families was all about not just working the land, not just possessing more and expanding, but whatever you expanded, you had to be able to defend. Because it wasn't like there were a bunch of fortified cities that they went and traded and did different stuff. This is just a house.
Right.
And so they would add on to the house and work the land and have to deal with other people. And so the Behor, who is Abram, saying at 75 years old, hey, I'm leaving, was disgraceful. It was so abnormal.
Well, and at this point, had God ever talked to anyone outside of Noah?
I mean, Adam, Eve, he
hadn't
stopped talking to
in
people.
recent.
I don't know.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
and so here's God.
I just think that's
here's
interesting.
God's call, right? It's so odd that God's call to Abram to Abram is, hey, leave Dad's house. Leave it and head out and find this place that I have promised you.
Yeah.
That I am going to show you. And realistically, Terah had left Ur of the Chaldees. He had left the Chaldean land of Ur and headed in the direction of Canaan, and he stopped in this place called Haran, which I guess maybe he named it after the loss of his son. Maybe that's where Haran died, and so they named it that to honor him. Either way.
Yeah.
Go ahead, interject. Yeah, maybe that is a reality, that Terah was supposed to take his family to the land of Canaan eventually. But here's what's crazy about that. If that is what happened, he was still carrying these gods with him.
But his son died and he decided to stay and mourn his son.
And maybe he did. But here's the deal. All that being aside, when this guy dies and this guy says, I'm not thinking about me, I want to do what's right for this wife, this offspring of my brother. I'm going to take her as my wife.
Because based on tradition and custom of the time itself, she would have had nothing.
She would have had nothing. That's right.
No one would have taken her.
She would have been left with nothing. And people and again, people look at this, and then it says something else that's really strange. What else is really strange about this statement? About what's going on here? So,
I will make you a great nation?
Abram is rejecting, God is calling Abram to, hey, leave all this stuff behind.
Yeah.
And we're going to see Nahor later on in the story. We're going to interact with him. Terah's house was pretty well off. They weren't hurting.
No.
He's walking away from all that. So God calls him. He takes his wife and leaves, but he takes something else with him, which is very odd.
The nephew.
Why?
I don't know.
Why? Yes, technically, and we're going to get to that here in just a little bit because that's in chapter 14. But why?
Right, because it's not like...
Why is he taking Lot with him?
Offspring.
Yes.
Because Sarai can't reproduce. So if his name is going to continue, such as the tradition, if he's going to be the Behor or the...
So there's a lot of faith in
If he's
this.
going to have the Beta, it's going to have to be...
If he's going to build a Beta,
continued through someone else.
It's going to grow, and there's going to be a lineage with his name attached to it.
It's going to have to come through someone else.
He knows that Sarai, that Iscah is barren.
Right.
So he's believing that the lineage that God has promised him is going to be counted through Lot.
Yep. Because it says, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you, make your name great.
And this is going to be a big deal. All right, so God has found a man who is selfless, who acted selflessly, and then he calls that man to even more selflessness. Yes? Because that's a lot to walk away from. The most important one of all of them, I believe, in God's eyes, is this one right here.
True.
The gods.
True.
to leave all the gods and leave all the things of his father's house behind and let him be the provision
How much are we reading tonight?
and let him be enough. We're going to get through the next part and then we're going to talk about the others. We're going to get through chapter 14 before we're going to get through. We're not reading it all. Keep
Okay.
going.
Okay, thank you. So, picking up in verse 7, chapter 12, verse 7. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. And there he built an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. And he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east.
Okay. So here he is at Shechem,
Mm-hmm.
and God tells him, I'm going to give you this land. And to your offspring, I'm going to give you this land. And then he went on. He continued moving. And I think it's important. We need to see this, and I'm going to give away something. This is a bookend. This is a bookend.
So that means there's a chiasm.
The bookend, the beginning bookend of the chiasm is that Bethel was on, that he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east.
So this is the beginning.
This is the beginning.
Okay, so can we keep going?
Go ahead.
So there he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. So Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south.
Toward the Negev is what it says.
Negev,
Which is in the direction of Egypt.
Okay. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe in the land.
I'm going to say time out for just a second. I'm going to ask a question about this. If you're in a desert, how do you know that the famine is severe? If you're in a desert that you've never lived before.
I would assume it's word of mouth, but what do you think?
Asking.
That because where they were going was a trade route.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that the caravans going back and forth.
Trade route. Somebody would have said, yes.
We're going to Egypt because there's a famine.
Yeah.
And we're leaving here. So they were traveling along a trade route. They wouldn't have gone just out across the desert.
And Avram has taken everything that he's acquired, which is being the Behor in a house of a man who's still alive, who hasn't declared himself dead yet. See the prodigal son story.
Right.
There's not much he's got once he leaves dad's house.
I feel like he left with a lot, but
Maybe he does. But he doesn't say how much.
true.
We don't know how much he actually has until later on here. Potentially not very much.
Okay. I don't know that that's relevant to this very
It
moment.
is going to be relevant.
In this very, very moment.
Yes.
Okay. Well, can we move on?
So, again,
Stop giving it away.
no, a question to ask. How does he know? Word of mouth is the...
That's what I said. Word of mouth.
All right, so go ahead.
I don't know.
Verse 11.
Okay, thank you. And it came to pass, when he was close to entering Egypt, that he said to Sarai his wife, indeed, I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Therefore it will happen when the Egyptians see you, that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you. I just thought you would interrupt me.
Nope.
So it was, when Abram came into Egypt, that the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very beautiful. The princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. He treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels.
Okay.
Who did? Abram did?
Avram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys.
So that's how the Pharaoh treated them.
Yeah.
Was with those things. Okay.
So, you see, was there anything that repeated yet for you?
Yes, several things.
Yeah. So go ahead. But the Lord
plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Now therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go your way." So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had.
Keep going.
Then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him to the south. Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And I'm going to just say that that's the other bookend.
That is the other
before
bookend.
he can say it.
Yeah, that's why we're continuing on all the way there. So
Yes.
let's talk about a
He
couple
likes
things.
to bring in all the really cool stuff.
That's the other bookend.
I know.
Great
That's
catch.
what. Thank you. I already said that.
Great catch. So 13 verse 4 is the second is the other bookend. Let's talk about what's happening here. Is a question that we discussed a little bit last week, and I'm sure you've stewed over it. Is Abram lying?
When he tells Pharaoh that that's his sister.
Correct. God doesn't say that he is. That's a good statement. Now, he uses a term that is obvious. It's obviously translated sister, but in the Hebrew, it would be implied that she is a close relative. So he isn't lying. And realistically, he isn't telling the truth either. So we're not going to let him off the hook of being like, okay.
He's not above reproach here.
Right. And it's easy for us to look at this and say, well, and let's be honest, this is a bad look. This is a bad deal. But Abram stops Sarai and stops the caravan on their way into Egypt, and he communicates this. And I want us to think about this for just a second. What if Abram making this statement to Sarai was actually a plan?
To acquire more stuff?
So, what if...
Hey, we left Dad's house. We don't have much. Let's go ahead and take
so now
you,
he is
pretty lady, to the
establishing
Pharaoh's
what?
house.
Okay. now, hold on.
How would he know that Pharaoh
Wouldn't kill him.
No. We're gonna hold on just a second. Let's talk about this. Who is... Abram has left Terah's house. So now, whose Beit-Av is it? Whose house is it?
Avram's.
Abram.
What, bud? What's your question?
In the marriage customs,
What if his son was what?
what if his son what? Okay, we're going to move on.
We'll get there.
So it's Avram's Beit-Av, and you hit on it, right? If Sarai is introduced as Avram's wife, then what? She's off the market. But Abram says, tell them you're my sister. And it will be clear coming into town that you are available. We're going to put you out there and on the market, which means people are going to have to talk to me.
Because he's the Behor.
Because it's his Beit-Av. He is the one in charge. So what is Abram doing? Abram is coming into Egypt and he is selling his wife. He is taking bids, and his intention, if we understand this correctly, is to gather stuff to collect bride prices and bribes.
I'm also studying this right now. Did you know that?
To collect bride prices and bribes from people and have no intention to give his wife away and realize one day, hey, I think we've got enough stuff. Let's leave town before anybody figures it out. Okay? Now, as Abram enters Egypt, what position does it put him in for all these people?
Well, he gets to take the highest bid.
He's taken the highest bid. He is in control. If you think
I don't
of
think that he thought that Pharaoh was going to be the one to offer, though.
So if you see the Susul Vashran covenant, the Susul is the person of strength. The Vashran is the one of weakness.
Because we talked about that in Noah
with the rainbow.
With the rainbow, yeah. Not in Noah.
It's not quite the same. It is a relationship covenant, but it's still the same. The father of the bride is the Beit-Off leader of the bride is the one of complete authority.
Right.
Unless
it's Pharaoh.
Unless Pharaoh's involved. The most powerful man in all the world.
He trumps everything.
He gets to take what he wants and give you what he wants, and that's his. So I also have another point to bring up here. Sarai is like over 65 years old.
At least.
There's, like, the fact that is all going on is ridiculous at 65.
Okay, but
that
think
is a
about
really
the
impressive
lifespan.
thing.
Because,
lifespan's still around 125 years. She's a middle-aged woman that people are falling over themselves. So much so that people see her. It isn't even, Pharaoh doesn't even see her. Pharaoh's advisors see her and go, hey,
that's it.
There's a new girl in town.
Right.
And you're going to want her.
That's crazy.
And right about the place that Abram's plan falls apart and starts to just go off the rails is the middle of our chiasm.
Is that when plagues happened?
No, it's before the plagues.
That?
Yes. Ask Jonas.
Oh, because he took her.
So he says to her, when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. They will kill me. Say you are my sister, that I will be treated well for your sake. So he said to be treated well for your sake. And then it says he treated Abram well for her sake. Interesting.
And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. Is that the middle?
Yeah.
Oops.
So basically the middle is, and when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Paro, and she was taken into his palace. Like, that's the middle of the chiasm. The failure of, and again, not letting him off the hook, because he was definitely lying. He definitely had
a motive.
Here.
Yeah.
Yes. But then, like, he had an intention of being the person in control, and he lost control.
Right.
And this is like one of the only places, or one of the main places in Abram's life that he acts out of character. Because the character of Abram is about others.
Right.
And not himself. And he comes into Egypt with a plan. We're going to protect ourselves by being here, but we're going to get something out of this. I'm going to grow my household and my ability to survive by taking the highest bid and the most bribes for you, and then we're going to get out of town and run for our lives.
Well, he didn't even have to run, though, right?
But this is like where no, he didn't have to run in the end.
Yes. Right, there in that moment.
Stop.
Yes. And they sent him away.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. God is like, okay,
right.
I brought you out of your father's house and gave up your gods, not for you to hang out in Egypt and take on their gods.
Yeah, so get going.
Because that's what was coming next. Because if he had to go negotiate with Paro, in the Egyptian culture, Pharaoh was the chief god.
Right.
Like, that's where it came from. And so
So are we going to continue on?
it's crazy that this happened. We're just going to talk through the next stuff. But this is kind of a dangerous place, isn't it? In the rest of the scripture that we've read up until now, what has happened every time someone stops and settles in a place? Good things or bad things?
Bad things. Every
Bad
single
things.
time.
What happened in Babel?
Oh, they started to build a tower.
They built a tower. They built stuff that was permanent.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like here we go again.
Right.
Because God's call to people was to what? To subdue the earth,
Go forth and
fill
multiply.
it out,
Yeah.
multiply. And here he is with Abram. First time in the Bible that it's recorded, he says, stay here. And what does Abram do? He even shows his character is different in the way that he goes about it. What did he do? What happens in the story? No, after that.
He
Chapter
built
13.
he built an altar.
Okay, yes. In chapter 12, he gets to between Bethel and Ai, and there he built an altar to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So he built a tower.
But it wasn't.
Just a mini tower.
Right. But it wasn't for himself.
But it wasn't for him. And then in chapter 13, what did he do?
Same thing.
But where did he live? What did he build for God?
The altar.
Out of what?
Stone.
Stone.
Permanence.
It was permanent.
But he lived in tents.
But he lived in a tent.
Yeah.
Like, even in the way that he was acting, Abram said, I may not be permanent here, but God is.
Mm-hmm.
I may not be, it's not about my name being permanent, it's about God's name being permanent. Like, this is the character of Abram. This is the true character of Abram. So in chapter 13, we see another thing happen. It says that he comes out of Egypt with a ridiculous amount of people. It's like, where'd it go? Servants and everything. His Beta, by the time he leaves Egypt, is like 518 people.
And we don't even know really how long he was there.
Nope,
right?
But all that stuff came from Pharaoh. He was rich in silver.
He was rich in
gold,
livestock and silver and in gold.
Maid servants and manservants.
Oh,
and
because
Lot.
it says.
And he had Lot too.
Yeah. Well, and then it says that he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels, as well as very rich in livestock, meaning it could have been anything.
Yeah.
Sheep, goats, cattle, in silver and in gold.
So now here we are, back in the place that God had called him to be.
Right.
With a lot more people and a lot more livestock to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So they're working herds, and Lot is there with them, and he has his herds as well.
Right.
And they begin to quarrel. It says, now Lot who was moving about with Abram also had flocks and herds and tents. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herdsmen and the herdsmen of Lot. The Canaanites and Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. So Abram said to Lot, look, let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are brothers. Is he Lot's brother?
No.
He's a close relative. Is there another place recently that he has called someone a relative that they're not actually that?
His wife.
His
Yes.
wife, yeah. The historically the Hebrew tradition would teach us that chapter 12 and chapter 13 cannot be separated. They are together.
Okay.
Anyway, and this is part of how they do that. He says, "For we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you?" But it just said there are other people there.
Right.
We have all of this land in front of us. Well, you just said that there were people here.
Yeah.
The Canaanites and the Perizzites. Anyway, let's part company. Okay? Hey, we're going to split up. Who has the authority in this relationship?
The Badov.
Whose
Avram.
Badov is it?
It's Avram's.
And he brought Lot along.
Right.
And he brought him along for what again?
For his offspring. To carry on the name, the lineage.
So if...
Why would he send him away? That's a great question. The question he's leading us to.
Why would he send him away?
Because we're talking about the father of faith here.
Like this had to be... I'm sure if you thought that your lineage and your heritage depended on this guy,
there's no way you would send him away.
You're going to endure a lot of bickering and a lot of things
right.
to keep that guy around.
Yeah. But he says, if you take the left, I will take the right. And if you go to the right, then I will go to the left.
So he's letting this guy go who the only reason he brought him along was to fulfill the covenant that God was making, to fulfill the promise that God had made with him.
Right.
And now he's going to let him go. And not only is he going to just let him go, he's going to let him pick where he lives, and he'll go the other way. This is the character of Abram. This is the character of Abram. It's not about me. It's how he picked his wife.
Mm-hmm.
It's how he put himself in a tent and God in a permanent dwelling, like God in a permanent structure to come back to.
Yeah.
That God was the mile marker. God was the measuring stick. God was the where am I in this place? And now here he is with the one who's supposed to, like, that he believes in faith is going to be his lineage. And he says, go wherever you want, and I'll go away from you.
You can have first choice.
And maybe so. And over time, because he definitely didn't show it here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are.
Right.
And I don't think it's a mistake here. Because what happens after they separate? Lot chooses this Jordan River Valley that's really well watered.
Yeah.
Happens to have this place that is not mentioned before now, then all of a sudden is mentioned.
Right. Sodom
and Gomorrah.
Sodom and...
We're like,
yeah.
Well, we didn't know that. Nobody ever said anything about that. I mean, it's going to be important.
Well, in my Bible, in verse 10, it says, Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of the Jordan, and that it was well watered everywhere. And then in parentheses, it says, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah. We have the valley, what is it? The kingdom of Zoar? Zoar? Yeah. And it is in parentheses. So they're saying, hey, this is before Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. So if you are looking there and you're like, well, there's nothing here. This isn't well watered. There's no cities here. It's because those cities have been destroyed. So
right.
It was like even in the first writing,
mm-hmm.
officially like being oral tradition given to. Yeah, well,
yes.
It was already It had already happened. The Goshen.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, it's the most fertile place in the world now.
It is still now, yeah.
And we'll get to that later, but the cross section, most places, the topsoil, the topsoil of good fertile soil is somewhere between like 15 to 20 feet deep. Most places in the world, in the Goshen Valley, in the delta of the Nile, it's like 175 feet deep.
That's crazy.
The topsoil that's good for. And so that's where, like, that's a huge deal. Anyway, we'll get to that later. But, so here we are. Lot and Abram have separated ways.
And then the Lord talks.
And then, is there any mistake here? Like, is there any doubt of what God is doing when this promise that God has given Abram, and he's been holding on to Lot and carrying him around with him and ushering him around with him because he thought that's where it was coming from. And the moment they separate, God speaks. And what's he telling?
And the Lord said to Abram, we should say, Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, which I think is so important, like you just said, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants could also be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of, how do you say that word?
Mamre,
which are in Hebron.
At Hebron.
Hebron, yeah, and built an altar there to the Lord.
If you've read much of the Bible, what does that statement that God makes to him sound like?
Which part?
He says, lift up your eyes from where you are and look north and south, east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and the breadth of the land.
It sounds like the Garden of Eden.
For I am giving it to you. To me, it sounds like Joshua.
Oh, I thought you were talking about going backwards.
He tells Joshua,
chapter
hey,
6 or something, right?
Wherever your foot, where the sole of your foot trods, I've given that to you. Like, this is the command. I think it's Joshua 1:6.
Oh, yeah, I knew there's a 6 in it. Yeah.
This really is mirrored right here, isn't it? Because God told him to go. And then it goes on this crazy story, talks about all these guys, and there becomes this fight. There comes this fight. These 5 kings fight against these 4 kings, and one of those kings that's fighting is the king of Sodom. And he's overtaken, and they're taken captive. Which is interesting, because if the king of Sodom is taken captive, who else is taken captive? Lot. Lot is taken captive. So Abram says, hey, we're going to get my brother, my nephew. So he gets all of the men who are of fighting age. He called out the 318 trained men born in his household.
How much time has passed? That's a lot of people.
318 trained men out of his household. And he goes and he wins. And he sets those guys free, and he gets Lot. And here we get this crazy happening. Because in the presence, like, we often refer to this story, this particular story, because he gives 10% of everything that everything that he has to this man named Melchizedek. But what we miss in the story is that with him eating with Melchizedek, the priest of God Most High, that it says that Jesus is a priest of the order of Melchizedek. That's a whole different story. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, priest of the God Most High, there's another king there with him.
What verse are you in?
I am at the back end here. After verse 17, after Abram returned from defeating Chedorlaomer and the kings allied with him, the king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shava, that is the king's valley. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who delivers your enemies into your hands. So Abram isn't there by himself. The king of Sodom is there with him. I never knew that. I mean, I've read this several times and always missed that.
I think I'm so confused on what you're saying. I think I missed the transition into this moment because I was talking to Jonas, but what are you talking about?
There's a war.
Right. And
Sodom gets taken.
Which means Lot gets taken.
Means Lot gets
because
taken.
Because all of Sodom is taken. So, by who?
By the king Chedorlaomer.
The name I don't want to say.
Yes, that's why I didn't have you read this.
At all. Okay.
And the kings that were allied with him. There were 5 kings total.
Okay.
Okay.
So Melchizedek is a king of Salem.
Priest of the God Most High.
Why does it say? Oh, he was the priest of the God Most High.
It says, okay. That's why I said later on, we're going to hear that Jesus is of the order of Melchizedek.
I got that. Yeah.
Okay. And I've always thought of this interaction as it just being Melchizedek and Abram, but it's not.
There's a bunch
of people. There's a pagan king there.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. Then Abram gave
what verse are you in?
Verse 20.
Thank you.
Back into verse 20. Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. The king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. What's he asking for?
No, he's asking for the people. He wants the kingdom.
He's telling Abram, keep all the spoils for yourself.
But I'm taking the people.
But I want the people back. Including Lot. So if he still believes, he already gave him up once.
Right.
And he went to rescue him just in case he was the lineage.
Right.
Why would you give him up again? But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord God Most High. This is so powerful if we really get it. Creator of heaven and earth, and have taken an oath that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the thong of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten and the share that belongs to the men who went with me, to Aner, Eshel, and Mamre. Let them have their share. He accepted nothing. He took 318 trained men from his own household to set free one man in particular was the mission. To get Lot. And he refused to take anything in the fight. Even though he was justified to take it all. Because he said, who was his provider?
The Lord.
The Lord. That's it. Nothing else. So much so that even here in this very moment, he has the ability and the right to say, you can have everybody except for Lot. But it doesn't say that he argues with him at all.
Right.
I don't want anything, which means I'm not keeping any of the people. So for a second time in 2 chapters, he lets Lot go again. And we're like, well, are you sure? Yeah, because the next time we interact with Lot, where is he?
In Sodom.
In the city.
In the city. Yeah. Oh, at the gate.
Within the city gates of Sodom.
Right.
So powerful. It's so crazy. Because the character of this man that is chosen by God is about selflessness. This is why Abram. This is the importance of this lineage. And we're going to discuss a few more things in our discussion time here. But it is so important for us to look at this story and go, there is so much more here than we have ever really dealt with. Because this move by Abram to leave his father's house and to turn all these things away, and then the decision of what was happening in Egypt, and then all the stuff that he carried out of Egypt, which is like 400 years from now is going to duplicate itself, right? Or 500 years, I guess, or more later, it's going to duplicate itself. They're going to carry out stuff from Paro because that wife that he's trying to keep, those slaves that he's trying to keep is not his. Again, so crazy, like all the imagery. But then the one man who is what he believes the key to the promise that God has made to him, he willingly lets go. Like, that's such a powerful thing for us to understand and for us to take in. Like, if we believe God has given us a calling and that he's given us a direction and something that we believe that it's supposed to be fulfilled through, we have to be willing to let it go so that only God can be identified as our provider. Only God can have a permanent space and a marker point that we always refer back to and let him provide whatever he is going to provide. And let him give us whatever he desires so that his name will be made. So we're going to spend some time in discussion group. Come and join us at 10:30 on Sunday morning. And have a great week.